Welcome to the Canadian Tech Journey. Okay, so in this one we'll be talking about RF behaviors, which is kind of a continuation of RF characteristics we spoke about in the last episode. Now, why is RF behaviors important is because how it behaves would impact the kind of performance it would have. So that's why I need to understand and I need to be aware of all those behaviors. So we'll talk about that in this particular episode or next few slides, as I would like to say. So a whole bunch of them, right? The way the wave propagates, it's going to get absorbed, reflection, scattering. It's kind of physics, so I won't go into details of all of that here. Most important one is obviously in this case is the loss, which is the attenuation, that when as the signal passes, the amplitude will decrease because it's the loss that's happening. And also something called as free space loss, which means it doesn't have to be that something is blocking my signal. So if you put an access point in an open field, it's not that it's going to keep continuing to lever. Obviously, as the signal passes, you will see the decrease in that amplitude, right? That's kind of what the free space loss is. The other things like absorption, why do I care? Is because you have to understand that if I'm placing Wi-Fi in a certain area, and for example, water absorbs RF, so my signal will be much more smaller. So let's say if I'm putting it in a warehouse where I have a lot of racks, which is liquids, I need to have my placement in such a way that the signal does not completely gets absorbed and there is hardly any signal strength left or any signal left for the client and the P to kind of communicate there, right? So those are the kind of things that impact Wi-Fi performance. That's why behavior of these different radio frequencies are kind of important to understand. Now again, few of them there that I was talking about absorption, because and also why we need to understand is human body is 65% water, right? So if you have a place where we have too many humans, like for example if it's a packed area like a stadium or an auditorium, then those effects get even bigger. Now sometimes we can take advantage of those to kind of, because as you learn more about this technology, you realize that you have frequency reuse. So if I have an AP in a certain channel, I cannot have the same AP, it's like same channel close by, because then it won't be able to talk because it's a half duplex system. Again, if you don't understand this at this point, that's fine. We'll discuss this in much more detail in further episodes. But the point that I'm trying to make is that you need to have something like a frequency reuse. Now, if you have this concept of absorption, for example, if it's a stadium, you have use cases where people are going to put APs under seats, so then when we have people sitting around, they act as an absorption. So my range of that AP is smaller, so I can have another AP close by without them interfering with each other from a co-channel perspective. So that's why these things are even more important to understand. Now, absorption, as I mentioned, like when a signal passes through a certain body, like or a certain thing, a certain material, it will absorb it, right? Now, partially or completely depends on the material that you're using. So I need to understand that from my behavior perspective, and it's most common one, right? Reflection, obviously, when you are sitting, you don't always have a clean line of sight. The signals you get are going to be bouncing through the walls and stuff and then coming to you. In Wi-Fi, especially during 802.11n, I think there was something called as multipath, which was actually, it was able to take advantage of multipath. Up until then, it was a scenario where it could actually cancel the signal or have a negative impact. But with the signal getting better, in terms of the way you do the signal processing, we were able to take advantage of multiple signals coming. I could combine them and try to get a bigger signal, so where I can still easily understand what the person on the other end was trying to send me and decode that message, right? Scattering, again, this happens a lot when you have especially areas like manufacturing plants and stuff. So I just need to be more aware of what it is and then what effect it could have on my Wi-Fi in general, right, from a negative perspective. Diffraction is also important, is because especially if you're having a point-to-point connection between two buildings where you're just trying to join two buildings using Wi-Fi, if you have a cloudy weather versus a sunny, it might change the line of sight. You will see the bending of the signal as you see in this picture. So trying to bring it here, which means that once you don't have that clean line of sight, then your performance might be degraded. Like you're expecting a certain throughput from that point-to-point bridge, which might not give it to you, right? So that is again something that I need to be aware of. So that's why refraction is kind of important. Same as diffraction. I won't go through the slides. I mean, that's why I have them there. I like to just, have people read through them. If you want to read through a certain slide, by all means, pause the video and go through it. But I'm just going to try and give you tips and bits, and goal is to keep the videos as short as I can in interest of time. Very important phenomena again, loss attenuation. When the signal passes through anything like a wall, obviously it will see drop in the amplitude, which means I'm gonna have a smaller signal. I'm losing my signal strength. So again, as I walk away from my access point, if you're looking for, from a layman perspective, just that signal bars, you'll see signal bars going down from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, or maybe you see nothing now, right? Like almost no signal. Free space loss, as I was saying before, is something to do with when I'm trying to get free space loss. What I need to understand here is that free space loss is a phenomena where I'm going, even in an open field, I'm going to still lose some of that, right? So again, it also talks about a 6 dB rule, which really means is the doubling the distance, right, will result in loss of amplitude by 6 dB or vice versa. So if I increase the power of my access point by 6 dB, the distance the signal can go is going to be almost double now. So that's how it goes. Now again, for some of you who are interested in actual formulas, you can look into that, but that's not something you need to remember, okay? So when we're talking about frequency, right, we're talking about frequency of a radio wave in this case. And as you can see, the formula above, I mean the one that we saw before, is just showing you the same thing, right? So again, in 2.4, it's less prevalent as in 5 gigahertz, because in 5 gigahertz the signal will travel less far as compared to 2.4, right? So again, this is also important, is because sometimes I have APs with dual radios, so I need to understand that which of my footprint is going to look bigger, 5 gigahertz versus my 2.4. Now once you start getting into 6 gigahertz, how's that going to look as compared to 5, right? Because a lot of people are in the process of upgrading from 5 to Wi-Fi 6E, which also includes a tri-band, which is 6 gigahertz in this case. So again, interesting aspect of how these things work. So I need to kind of also understand this free space loss. By the way, want to give credit to my friend Francois at CWNA Networks. He runs a great blog, by the way. So if you haven't seen his website, you should go to his website. There are a couple of websites I would highly recommend. One would be his, where he has a whole bunch of blogs, very good information, especially if you're in Canada and if you want to know about regulations. I think he has a couple of very good blogs. He does a very good job there. And definitely, if you have to learn more on Wi-Fi, there is no better channel than WLAN Professionals, which is run by Keith Person. He has this amazing conference. It's been going for 10 years, so congratulating Keith on that. I have been following his channel, always learned a lot during my journey for CWNA. Never been fortunate enough to be to one of these conferences, but since all these presentations have been put on YouTube, so I don't feel that at least I've missed it. I do miss meeting those people in person. So yeah, if you're anytime interested in wireless, these two sites are something that I would love to always keep them as a bookmark and learn a lot from these. Okay, all right, so let's get back to our slides again. From free space loss, again, this is a little snip that I've taken from Francois' blog, so credit to him there. If you look through it, how soon it drops, right? So if you have an amplitude here, it quickly drops, right? Initial drop is very quick, right? And again, it's a little different. Obviously, you have a smaller drop as compared to on 2.4 versus 5, so that tells you that. And he's mentioning the inverse square law there, which is minus 6 dB distance from the source is doubled, so which same thing. So again, every 6 dB the distance gets doubled, right? So that's what kind of it's showing here. So again, we're talking about the distance traveled by the Wi-Fi wave from the source, right? That's what we're talking about from a distance perspective. Now again, common sense tells us that it would make sense that if the signal was to lose its power, it should travel away from its source, right? Free space loss formula tells us exactly by how much, right? So the 6 dB rule, that's where it kind of comes up. And it's dB. So dB, again, if you know, dB is relative. So it's almost like the energy will be spread out 4 times in the area, so resulting in the signal will be lost by almost 4 times, right? So that's what is basically is trying to say. If you find it complicated, you can't remember much from here. All I want you to remember is every time you increase your signal strength by 6 dB, right, your distance your wave can travel gets doubled, or vice versa. Okay, that's the main important part that you need to remember from here. If you put something like an attenuation, like a wall, like it's a drywall, for example, it's dropping 3 dB. So when the signal passes through that, again, it's 3 dB, right? Now moving on, it had options where it's like you'll see up fade, down fade, nulling, and data corruption as an impact of these. Don't want to go into details for now, but just want to say that there are a few things that can happen. Up fade, just it means is it will increase the signal strength, down fade would be decrease, nulling would be canceling, data corruption, again, that's the most common one that really happens, right? And then you have this gain amplification, which is active gain and passive gain. So active gain and passive gain is the easy way I can think of that as, if you take an example of a balloon, if you start to push air into the balloon becomes big, right? So you're actually putting air into that. But if I already have an inflated balloon, if I start pressing the balloon on the sides with my hands, and you start to see the balloon kind of protruding out from the front, which really means now is this is passive gain. So that's where the antennas come in, where they try to focus the energy in a certain way, like the directional antennas. We'll talk about the same thing in antennas when we cover that. But that's the idea, right? So active gain is when you're actually adding something, like actually adding power. Passive gain is when you're just trying to use antennas to focus that power in a certain area. Okay, so hopefully that helps. So what are the 3 requirements? I'll like to close that here. When you want to have a successful communication, obviously you want to have 2 more devices to talk. So again, an AP and a client in this case, a medium like an RF in this case, and then some sort of rules, like what kind of rules are we going to use when we start to talk, right? There has to be a common language or a common set of rules when they talk, right? So these are the key requirements for the successful communication. So again, thank you for viewing this, and I'll see you at the next one. And that concludes another insightful journey through the world of technology with Canadian Tech Journey. I hope you've gained valuable insights and a deeper understanding. Remember, the learning doesn't stop here. Keep exploring, keep cautioning, and keep learning. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for more exciting content and updates. Thanks for joining me on the Canadian Tech Journey. Until next time, keep learning and stay curious. See you in the next adventure.